Welcome back, curious minds, to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're sharing something, well, pretty extraordinary with you. A document we found utterly captivating.
That's right. We're doing a deep dive into a text that just, wow, it grabbed us from the start. Spirit Voices, compiled by H. Montague Crane.
And this isn't fiction, not at all. It's a painstaking record.
Meticulously recorded accounts of actual trumpet séances. These were held in Christchurch, New Zealand, way back in the early 20th century.
It gives you this incredibly rare glimpse, maybe even unsettling for some, into alleged direct communication with, well, those who've passed on.
Yeah, imagine that. Not just, vague feelings or signs, but clear, audible conversation like you and I are talking now.
And it goes even further. Reports of physical healing apparently facilitated by beings from the spirit world. It really pushes the boundaries.
It absolutely does. So our mission today, really, is to unpack the mechanics. How did these spirit voices supposedly manifest?
And explore the spiritual ideas that came through these sessions, some really profound stuff.
And even get into how spirit doctors apparently offered tangible healing. We want to pull out the key insights, the core information from these records.
Kind of a shortcut for you. So you're well informed on this really fascinating, maybe even paradigm-shifting subject.
Exactly. So let's start this journey into the unseen.
All right, so let's start with the book itself, Spirit Voices. It sounds like it was a massive effort.
Oh, monumental is the right word.
And the publishers, their motivation wasn't typical, was it? Not about sales figures or anything like that.
Not at all. That's a really key point the source makes. The drive was not for monetary gain. Completely.
Which is unusual for publishing, even then.
Right. Their main goal, their only goal it seems, was to give permanency to these records, to preserve the accounts of these trumpet séances with Lancelot Bryce.
Just preservation. Wow.
Yeah, think about it. Ensuring these unique and what they clearly felt were invaluable, accounts weren't just lost to time. It speaks to this almost like sacred duty they felt.
That's serious dedication, especially considering how spiritualism was viewed back then, often with a lot of skepticism, even hostility.
Exactly. So they didn't just see it as, transcribing some weird events. They saw spirit voices as a message of life. That's the phrase they used.
And the message of life. That's
Yeah.
powerful phrasing.
Isn't it? Their hope was really altruistic. They hoped the book would light the way to spiritual truth and understanding, not just for New Zealand, but, well, for the world.
So less about documenting phenomena, more about sharing a whole philosophy.
Precisely. A way of understanding life, death, existence itself. Something they believed was transformative, comforting, and really needed.
A noble goal, definitely. But bringing something so, let's say, unconventional into the public eye, there must have been huge challenges.
Oh, immense. The sub-editor called them insurmountable odds.
So what exactly did H. Montague Crane and his team face?
Well, first off, the raw material was a mess. It wasn't like getting a neat manuscript. It was apparently available only in scraps at a time and scattered all over the book, without any portion being complete.
Oh, wow. Like piecing together a puzzle from confetti.
Exactly. Imagine trying to create a coherent narrative from just fragmented notes, maybe shorthand, scattered observations. A massive jigsaw puzzle.
That sounds like a nightmare for an editor, especially
Right.
for something meant to be a permanent record.
Totally. And then it got worse. A lot of the records, because they weren't initially taken for publication, ended up being duplicated or partly so.
Ah, so repetition.
Yeah, and they only realized this after a lot of it was already set in type,
Mm.
which is a huge, expensive process back then.
No. So they had to backtrack.
Big time. They spent significant time and trouble just weeding out all these repetitions,
Correct.
added huge delays, painstaking work.
And it wasn't just logistical problems, right? There was social pressure, fear.
You got it. This is where the stigma around spiritualism really hit them hard. After the type was set, some prominent participants got nervous. Really nervous.
About their names being in the book.
Exactly. They got uneasy about being publicly linked to what society often called such a cranky science as spiritualism.
Mm-hmm.
These were respected people, community figures.
And they threatened the publishers.
They threatened dire consequences if their names and contributions weren't pulled immediately.
Dire consequences. Wow. That really shows the social risk involved back then. You had to be brave, or maybe just really convinced.
Convinced is probably the word. The publishers felt backed into a corner. They decided it was better to bear the ills we have than to fly to others which we know not of, and they reluctantly agreed.
So they pulled names.
They did, and because of that, Several records had to be excluded altogether, even after all the work.
Oh, that's painful. All that effort wasted.
And it forced this massive rearranging of the whole book, a huge reshuffling of pages and chapters, altering content. It caused months of delay. Huge frustration, you can imagine.
It just sounds like this constant, exhausting battle against the material, against society.
Absolutely, an uphill struggle.
Yet, despite these insurmountable odds, they published it. That says so much about their determination.
It really does. The whole project was driven by pure tenacity of purpose, an unshakable firm belief that these records were just too important to lose. They had to be preserved, shared.
A real conviction.
Totally. The sub-editor, who did most of the heavy lifting, didn't even call it a job. They described it quite movingly as a labor of love.
A labor of love.
And H. Montague Crane, the main compiler, did his part on an honorary and onerous basis, helped out whenever needed. It was this deep, collective commitment born from that profound belief in the record's spiritual value that got Spirit Voices published. A testament to belief against the odds, really.
Okay, so we understand the huge effort behind the book. Let's pivot to the person at the very center of it all, Lancelot Bryce, the medium himself.
Right, the conduit for these voices.
What do the records tell us about him? His character, his integrity? That seems absolutely crucial here.
It really is presented as fundamental. The sources describe him as a man of unblemished character and integrity. His life was clean and honest.
So his reputation was key.
Absolutely vital, they believe, for genuine mediumship. Purity of intention, purity of being, was seen as necessary to connect with higher spiritual forces. For Bryce and his circle, spiritualism wasn't entertainment.
It was.
Spiritualism is a religion. That's how they saw it. He viewed his mediumship not as some personal talent for fame or money, but as a great gift from the eternal God of love.
Wow. A gift to be used for.
Solely for his honor and glory and for the happiness of all who seek eternal truth. This deep spiritual conviction really framed his whole approach, set him apart, maybe, from more sensationalist mediums of the time.
So, deeply faithful, a real sense of purpose. How did this ability actually develop? Was he born with it?
Well, it reportedly started incredibly young. At just 9 years old.
9. That's remarkable.
Isn't it? Suggests an innate sensitivity. Initially, the voices came mainly through the trumpets, which was pretty common for physical mediumship back then.
Right, the cones they used.
Yeah. But the records highlight this significant progression later on. He developed the ability to get voices in full light without the trumpet or music or any other help.
In full light, without aids.
Exactly, which implies a much deeper level of, well, spiritual development and control, moving beyond the physical tool, a real evolution of his gift.
And it sounds like he wasn't focused on just showing off powers, the more theatrical stuff.
You're spot on. Bryce himself didn't prioritize things like materializations or writing on slates or reports, objects appearing out of thin air.
Even though those things apparently happen sometimes in his circle.
Right, the sources confirm they did occur occasionally. But for Bryce and his group, the main focus was squarely on the teachings, the spiritual messages coming through his main guide, George Jones.
And those teachings were about?
Fundamental truths, really. That God is love beyond our conception, that life is eternal, and that advancement in knowledge and goodness is continuous. It was all about spiritual education, enlightenment, growth.
And the results. Was he consistent?
The records are emphatic. He was considered one of his best, if not the best, trumpet mediums in the world. And crucially, he apparently never failed to get good results over 3 solid years. Consistency was key.
That's impressive reliability.
And the sheer volume. It wasn't unusual to have 40 spirit friends speaking in one séance.
40.
Yeah. At one sitting, they recorded as many as 38 distinct voices, and it was rarely fewer than 20 communicators per session.
That volume alone challenges the idea of just one person faking it. What about the quality? Were the voices clear?
They emphasize that. Consistently described as audibly clear. Heard distinctly by every single sitter. No ambiguity.
And they present that clarity as evidence against?
Against imagination, hallucinations, self-hypnosis, the usual explanations. Plus, and this is a really significant detail,
What's that?
Mr. Bryce, the medium, was often in his full senses during manifestation and joins in the conversation.
So he wasn't always in a deep trance, he was aware.
Apparently so. Which kind of debunks that common image of the medium being completely out of it. Suggests more of a conscious collaboration, maybe? an aware participation.
Fascinating. Now, given how sensitive this was and the need for harmony you mentioned, how were these seances run? Were they public?
Oh, no, strictly private, very controlled environment,
Hmm.
no casual observers or, potentially disruptive people.
So how did people join?
Members were chosen by him and his guides,
Yeah.
that's what they said, to ensure that crucial harmony and get greater success.
Chosen by the guides, too. Interesting.
Yeah. Newcomers usually had to be recommended by some member. A vetting process, really, and they were only accepted if they already believe in spirit communion or are honest seekers.
Not just curious onlookers.
Definitely not. Not skeptics just looking to debunk either.
Yeah.
Strangers were even told to read certain spiritual books first before attending. Shows how serious they were. This wasn't a casual affair.
Sounds like a very dedicated, selective group, focused on integrity. Speaking of connections, did any family members come through from the spirit side? Any notable examples?
Yes, there's a really touching and specific family connection mentioned. His own deceased father, W.H. Bryce, apparently manifested.
His father.
Yeah. And get this, showing the persistence of earthly personality, his father mentioned his old business, Bryce's hair restore.
No way. He mentioned the hair restore.
He did. And apparently expressed hope that his son, Lancelot, would follow in that line of work too. It wasn't just a generic hello from the other side.
It's specific, personal.
Exactly. Retain memory, personal interest, a father's ongoing care. It's those kinds of details that, well, they add a real layer of poignancy and maybe credibility to these accounts.
Okay, Amanda, this is where my mind starts to bend a little. We've heard about the phenomena, but the big question is always, how?
Right. The million-dollar question.
Can you walk us through the mechanics described in Spirit Voices?
Yeah.
Starting with the stuff called ectoplasm. It sounds, well, kind of weird.
It does sound weird to our modern ears, for sure. But it's central to how they explain the physical stuff happening. Ectoplasm, as they describe it, isn't just like energy. It's presented as this tangible but ethereal substance.
Tangible? How so?
Think of it as a subtle bioenergetic goo, almost. A living vapor that could apparently solidify just enough to exert force.
Okay.
The sources say the trumpets, remember those cones, were held in midair by cantilever of ectoplasm.
A cantilever, like an invisible shelf made of goo.
Kind of. An energetic scaffolding. Not rigid like steel, but a focused projection of this pliable substance, making it temporary, unseen support. It really challenges our basic ideas of matter and energy.
And if conditions weren't right?
If conditions faltered, this ectoplasmic bridge would just break and the trumpets would clatter to the floor.
Mind-bending is right. So where does this stuff come from? Do the spirits just magic it up?
No, and that's a crucial point they hammered home. The spirits explicitly said, the ectoplasmic power does not come from us spirits, but from you sitters.
From the sitters, from the living people in the room.
Yes, we are the source. We're described as the batteries and transformers, providing the needed electricity and magnetism.
We're the power source.
Apparently, George Jones, the guide, even supposedly demonstrated how real and malleable it was. He drew it from a sitter.
Drew it out.
Yeah, passed it through the closed door, drew it over people's hands and faces. They said they could feel it and then put it back.
Wow. Okay. So it's like a subtle physical substance drawn from us.
That's the idea, highlighting our active, crucial role. We're not just watching. We're powering the event.
And our thoughts, our feelings affect this ectoplasm.
Directly. The quality, the amount of it, depends on the sitter's mental and emotional state. George Jones kept warning, if your thoughts are not pure and pleasant, you fail to get good results.
So negativity literally disrupts the power supply.
That's what they claimed. It shows this deep connection, our inner world directly impacting the potential for physical manifestation.
Okay, so this ectoplasm is drawn from the sitters. How does that energy turn into actual audible voices, the direct voice thing?
Right, the direct voice. For the trumpet amplification, they said spirits use etheric force, this energy field, in the circle. They use it to create vibrations inside those trumpets.
The tin or cardboard ones?
Yeah, usually about 34 inches long.
Mm.
They vibrate them at a rate similar to human speech, so our ears can pick it up. The trumpet basically acts like a megaphone.
Amplifying faint spirit sounds.
Exactly,
Yeah.
making subtle vibrations perceivable in our physical world.
But it wasn't just the trumpet, was it? They mentioned astral vocal organs. What on earth are those?
Yeah, that's a strange concept. To make those precise sounds, spirits supposedly use an extension of the astral counterpart of the medium's vocal organs.
Okay, translate that. Like a spiritual voice box?
Sort of. Think of it less as the medium's physical larynx and more like an energetic blueprint, an ethereal extension of the medium's vocal system but in the spirit dimension.
And the spirits manipulate that.
Yes, to produce distinct sound vibrations we can hear, completely independent of the medium's own physical vocal cords. That's how they explain different voices, accents, tones coming through.
Okay, that's intricate. What about external stuff? Like light, does it always have to be pitch black? And does weather matter?
Good questions. It's a common idea that seances have to be dark. But these records say voices could be produced in red or even white light sometimes.
Really? So why the dark usually?
They claimed darkness helps sound vibrations function clearer. Not for trickery, but for energy reasons. They compared it to radio waves, how white light rays have a disastrous effect upon certain vibrations.
Like daytime radio signals being weaker.
Exactly that analogy. Darkness reduced interference for these subtle vibrations. And yes, weather mattered. They specifically noted cold, frosty nights results are markedly good.
Better on cold nights.
Yeah, whereas muggy, wet weather apparently dampened the results significantly. Shows a real sensitivity to the environment, like atmospheric interference affecting a signal.
So it's this delicate balance. Inner energy from people, outer conditions. Was the trumpet always needed?
Not always. More advanced spirits, they said, could produce voices without any trumpet. They called it an independent voice.
And those sounded different.
Often described as more characteristic of their earthly voice, more like the actual person. Figures like Dean Jacobs and George Jones could apparently speak directly, sometimes even in strong electric light.
That's amazing, given the need for darkness usually.
It is. The Grand Duke Nicholas also reportedly produced voices in full light, without a megaphone, though maybe weaker. Suggests different levels of power or control among spirits.
Did they ever manage to record these voices, like actual audio evidence?
They tried. With the technology of the time, wax phonograph records were apparently made.
They recorded the spirit voices.
That's the claim. George Jones even apparently predicted listeners would recognize his voice on the recordings, suggesting it was distinct and repeatable. Lord Northcliffe, a big name back then, also supposedly spoke directly into a recording horn. A real effort to capture proof.
Beyond voices, what about other physical stuff? Things moving. Tangible proof.
Oh yeah, plenty of that reported. Objects moving, sometimes heavy ones. They mentioned a fairly heavy fire screen being lifted and carried across the room to the medium.
By itself?
Apparently. Defying physics as we know it. Even the couch upon which medium is seated was supposedly lifted by unseen power, attributed to George Jones's strength.
Lifting the couch with the medium on it? Wow.
And then there's this odd detail. A small bird would sometimes flutter around the room, apparently leaving material proof of its presence before being taken away by the spirits. Tangible interactions.
A bird. That's specific. What about writing? Did spirits leave messages?
Yes, writing phenomena too. Writing on slates happened, using a small bit of pencil. And the writing looks strange, as if the pencil had been powdered.
Powdered. Not like normal writing.
Suggests a different, subtle method. And automatic writing happened through Mr. and Mrs. Crane, the book's compilers, sometimes at terrific speed, with the person writing apparently unaware of the content. External control suggested.
And there was that really weird, intricate thing with the Crane's wall, right? The etched designs?
Yes. That's one of the most complex and compelling anecdotes. Queer Claw, an Indian spirit guide connected to the Cranes.
Queer Claw.
That was his name in the records. He apparently etched 36 designs right into the fresh plaster walls of their seance room, using concentrated magnetism drawn from Mr. and Mrs. Crane themselves, their energy used as the tool.
And the designs meant something.
Get this. They were later proven to be the insignia of Spirit Dr. de Lautour, and the details about this doctor, found in the Crane's own office desk.
Conveniently located.
Right. And then, that same spirit doctor communicated a message from that desk. It's like this multi-layered, self-corroborating piece of evidence. Highly sophisticated.
Okay, this is really getting into the deep end now. We've talked about how things supposedly happened, but let's focus on who is guiding all this. The spirit guides.
Absolutely pivotal figures in these accounts.
The book even specifically thanks George Jones, Unison, and all other spirit friends and teachers. Who are these spiritual helpers? What did they do?
They're presented as, well, highly advanced souls, dedicated to helping humanity, helping less developed spirits. Always focus on spiritual growth, God's love.
So not just random spirits popping in.
No, definitely not. They're active, intelligent participants, shaping conditions, giving teachings, even cracking jokes sometimes. They add this layer of purpose and intelligence to it all.
Let's start with Unison. She sounds like she was often the first point of contact, maybe managing the practical side.
That's a good way to put it. Unison is described as Mr. Bryce's main spirit helper, and control. Kind of the gatekeeper, the facilitator for the circle.
And her background, did they know anything about her earthly life?
Yes, she apparently communicated that she was a little slave girl born in North Africa. When she first started talking through Bryce, her English was apparently very broken.
Which suggests a real personality, retained traits.
Exactly. Her name was originally Topsy, but it was changed to Unison as a reward for her untiring efforts in helping Bryce develop the direct voice. Unison, symbolizing her role in creating harmony.
So what was her main job in the séances?
Assisting weak spirits to speak to their earth friends, like a bridge for those struggling to communicate. She also handled physical stuff, moving trumpets, touching sitters gently on hands or faces. And she interacted humorously sometimes, described as charming and untiring. A very helpful, compassionate presence.
Okay, then there's George Jones, the Irishman. He sounds like a real character, very central, very opinionated.
Oh, absolutely. A huge personality. He's identified as an excommunicated Roman Catholic priest, but nevertheless one of the greatest of souls.
Excommunicated. Interesting.
And proud of his roots. He apparently said, "I am an Irishman, and I do not care who knows it." Defiant, strong.
Yeah.
You could recognize him instantly by his strong yet pleasant voice and his frequent lecturettes.
Lecturettes, little sermons.
Kind of, yeah. Insightful talks. He was also apparently an enthusiastic Mason on Earth, which might explain some of his focus on universal truths, brotherhood, that kind of thing.
What were his main roles? He seems like he did a lot.
Hugely multifaceted. First, he was the main teacher and dispenser of knowledge. Explained ectoplasm, redefined heaven and hell, saying they're mental states, no physical Satan or demons, stressed prayer, explained how mediumship worked.
So the philosophy guy.
Big time. Second, and this is really compassionate, he was a helper of undeveloped spirits. He'd bring souls to the circle who were maybe earthbound, confused, unaware they'd passed, or stuck in mental darkness.
Stuck because of.
Earthly issues, maybe vices, grief, rigid religious beliefs trapping them. He believed contact with the Earth Circle helped them realize the situation and move on.
That's quite a mission.
He constantly urged the sitters to pray for these souls in darkness, saying they were more precious to God in their need and caused much sorrow in the spirit world. Really drove home the need for compassion.
Well, what else did he do?
He acted as a voucher of authenticity, like he'd vouch for other spirits, confirming they were who they said they were, which must have been reassuring.
The quality control check.
Kind of. And finally, he was a mentor and supporter, the one who keeps the door ajar between the two worlds, always stressing harmony, pure thoughts, receptivity, warning that disharmony breaks the vortex that supplies the power, cuts the connection.
And he talked about bigger picture stuff too, cosmology.
He did. Gave this cosmic perspective. Said natural disasters, like that big 1929 New Zealand earthquake, aren't God's judgment. Just natural processes, shrinkage of the Earth's crust.
Takes God out of the punishment business.
Exactly. And he even suggested maybe we've lived on other planets before, that Earth, Sun, Moon are just lesser planets in a much vaster universe. Really expansive ideas.
Okay, next guide. Dean Jacobs, a former clergyman. That's a fascinating angle.
It really is. He had a distinguished life. Born 1824, Oxford educated, came to New Zealand, became the first dean of Christchurch Cathedral in 1866. Passed in 1901.
A pillar of the church, so what did he do from the spirit side?
He continued as a spiritual teacher, gave his own lecturettes, emphasizing that this work, the séances, were a revelation of God to men. Proof that life is not extinguished when the body ceases to function.
Proof of survival.
Yes, and he urged sitters to rise higher and higher spiritually towards God's wonderful throne. Very focused on spiritual aspiration.
Quite a shift for a former dean, embracing spirit communication so directly, and he did rituals.
Yes, remarkably. He apparently presided over the Lord's Supper, or Holy Communion, during some séances. Blessed bread and wine.
A spirit-conducting communion.
That's what the records say. Described as unique in modern spiritualism. A real blending of traditional religion and direct spirit phenomena.
What did he teach about spiritual progress, and how did he see spiritualism fitting in with the church?
He assured them spiritualism is a religion founded on fact, demonstrable fact, not just belief, and, crucially, approved by God.
God approves, according to the dean.
According to Dean Jacobs, yes. He was optimistic, saw spiritualism gaining acceptance in churches, said it would uplift the church, provide a satisfaction the churches fail to give, fill a gap, maybe.
A missing piece?
Yeah. He believed God's light will flow more freely through this. He also stressed harmony, faith, sincerity for good results. Said spirits are attracted by light emanating from circle, the positive energy.
Did his views change after he passed?
Significantly. While he initially held traditional church views, after passing his outlook broadened, embraced a more universal view of religion. He evolved.
Okay, last guide mentioned prominently. Queer Claw. Unique name, unique methods.
Definitely unique methods. An Indian spirit guide attached specifically to the cranes, the compilers. He demonstrated that supernatural evidence of a unique nature.
B.L. Eschings again.
Exactly. Those 36 designs etched into the plaster, using concentrated magnetism drawn from the cranes, their energy, his direction.
And linked to Dr. de la Tour.
Yes, the designs were identified as Dr. de la Tour's insignia, whose details were in their desk and who also communicated. A really complex, layered piece of evidence. Queer Claw was described as a most clever and experienced guide for pulling that off. Very tangible.
Okay, so we have these guides, these phenomena. What's the bigger picture here? What fundamental truths did these communications supposedly reveal about life, death, the universe?
Well, the core message, maybe the most comforting one, is the absolute continuity of personality after death.
Death isn't the end?
Not at all. Death does not end all, they state emphatically. It's a metamorphosis, a transition, a birth of the spirit into spirit realms.
A transformation, not an ending.
Precisely. The book stresses that the survival of the mind, or spirit, isn't just wishful thinking. It's been proved and acknowledged by hard-headed scientists, doctors, authors, and millions who've encountered the evidence.
And the idea is that communication is getting easier.
Yes, that the veil between worlds is thinning. As consciousness evolves, connection becomes more accessible.
And it's not just some vague survival, right? Our personality, who we are, continues.
That's key. Spirits retain their full mental personality. Memories, habits, quirks, idiosyncrasies, all intact.
Like the guy asking about his horses.
Exactly. The horse-loving widower asking about feeding routines, warning about specific grass for his racer, details only he'd care about.
Or Lord Asquith giving political forecasts.
Right. The former prime minister giving a highly accurate forecast for an election, complete with his typical parliamentary style. It shows a robust, continuing individual identity, not just a faded memory.
So our inner world continues. Speaking of which, what about heaven and hell? These records seem to completely redefine those concepts.
Radically. This is a huge shift from traditional religious views. The records state flat out, neither a physical hell, nor Satan, nor demons exist.
No fire and brimstone, no devil.
Nope. They are but the product of ignorant minds or undeveloped spirits. Heaven and hell aren't places you go to. They're states you're in.
States of mind.
Exactly. The fundamental truth is God is love and love is heaven. Hell is an eternal punishment. It's experienced as mental anguish.
Anguish from what?
From wrongs done on earth, maybe. A kind of spiritual cleansing. Or just a mental darkness created by your own thoughts, actions, limiting beliefs. It's internal, self-created, not an external sentence.
That feels more logical and more compassionate, maybe. Takes away the fear of some external punisher.
It empowers the individual, suggests accountability for your own spiritual state, and it implies continuous growth, doesn't it? Not just arriving somewhere and staying put.
Right. The spirit world isn't static.
Far from it. All stages of progress reign in the spiritual life. Physical death is only the beginning of your spiritual body. It's a journey.
So spirits aren't instantly all-knowing.
No, knowledge is absorbed gradually. The mind absorbs new experiences, and more knowledge is added as it is ready to receive it. Continuous learning expansion.
And apparently knowing about this before you pass helps.
Seems so. They mentioned spirits who passed 50 years ago had a harder experience because earthly understanding of spiritual progress was less common then. Knowing helps the transition.
And spirits aren't just resting in peace.
Definitely not RIP. They're described as full of energy, going on, striving to make good, actively working on self-improvement, maybe helping others. Very dynamic.
What about God? What's the message about the divine nature?
Overwhelmingly, God is love beyond our conception, all-encompassing, benevolent love. And crucially, God is not a God of destruction.
So natural disasters aren't punishments.
Explicitly not. Earthquakes, etc., are explained as natural processes, shrinkage of the Earth's crust, scientific stuff, not divine judgment. God operates through universal natural laws driven by love.
Okay, now, for probably the most provocative part, the view of Jesus Christ. He's called the ultimate medium. How do they explain that?
This is where it really challenges conventional views. Jesus is presented not just as a religious figure, but as someone with immense psychic and spiritual power, the ultimate medium.
How do they justify that?
They point to his miracles. The account of doubting Thomas feeling his resurrected body,
Yeah.
they interpret that as direct evidence of materialization ability.
So a physical manifestation, like in a séance.
That's the parallel they draw, affirming him as a powerful medium, maybe the greatest medium who has ever lived. The text even states point blank, Jesus Christ was a spiritualist, and spiritualism is approved by God.
Wow. So miracles weren't supernatural breaks in reality, but demonstrations of advanced spiritual abilities.
That's the interpretation offered. Mastery of spiritual and energetic principles. His parables, given symbolically because the world back then wasn't ready for literal explanations. It would have been incomprehensible, maybe dangerous.
It is this.
His life was a most beautiful and perfect example of mankind. A mission to guide us to spiritual truth, uplift and purify your world. He's the great mediator and savior, exemplifying love, helping us find that great and wondrous immortality.
And this work continues.
They suggest God is still establishing his church on earth through the agency of his spirit friends and the spiritualistic workers, a direct continuity of Christ's work through these phenomena evolving with us.
So how does this view of spiritualism relate to traditional churches? Is it trying to replace them?
Not replace, enhance, fill a gap. It's presented as a rational religion based on demonstrative fact, not blind faith.
A revival of early Christianity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A revival of early Christian experience. They claim the so-called miracles of the New Testament, speaking in tongues, trance, prophecy, materializations, direct voice, healing, are happening again in séance rooms.
But they're also critical of the churches.
Critical of dogma, yeah. Saying true religion and undefiled gets hidden by dogmas, creeds, and petty jealousies. Suggesting many clergy are maybe in doubt about the afterlife themselves, bound by dogma, unable to preach these comforting truths.
So the goal isn't destruction, but revitalization.
Precisely. Not to destroy the church, but to uplift it above the dreary, like dullness and stagnation they perceived. Believing spiritualism would develop the church by bringing back those direct experiences.
Do they offer any proof of clergy agreeing?
Yes, they include the testimony of Reverend G. Noel Smith, a New Zealand clergyman. He experienced direct voice himself and concluded spiritualism would develop the church, a powerful endorsement from within the establishment.
So the final message to the churches is?
Basically a plea. The Christian church must not condemn the communion of spirits, embrace it as legitimate, divinely sanctioned path to spiritual growth.
All right, we've got the big ideas, the guides. Let's get practical again. The séance room itself, how was it set up? What rituals were involved to make these delicate things happen?
Yeah, the environment was crucial. They were meticulous about it.
Right.
First, light. We touched on this, but it wasn't always pitch black.
Right, voices could come in light sometimes.
Exactly. But generally, darkness helps sound vibrations function clearer. Less interference for those subtle energies, like needing quiet to hear a whisper.
And the weather connection again?
Cold, frosty nights results are markedly good, while muggy, wet weather dampened things. Shows how sensitive the whole process was believed to be.
Okay, so light and atmosphere mattered. How did people sit? Was there a specific arrangement?
Absolutely. They formed a physical circle, everyone usually in his usual place, session after session. Consistency helped, and posture was strict.
Strict how?
Explicit rules. Do not hold hands. Keep hands on their knees, feet flat on the floor. And definitely, on no account, cross their legs nor have their feet touching each other.
Why so specific? To keep the energy flowing.
That was the idea, to maintain an unbroken energetic circuit, prevent any short-circuiting of that ectoplasmic power they believed they were generating together. Underscores how active the sitter's role was.
And the trumpets, those cones. Any special preparation for them?
Yes, a little ritual. Usually 5 trumpets in a session. They'd pass them around the circle first. Each sitter holds one briefly.
To charge them with energy, maybe?
Possibly. Then they go back to the medium, Mr. Bryce. He'd pour a little water through them and stands them on the floor. Cleansing, charging. Symbolic, anyway.
And
Then a strict rule. One must not touch them after Mr. Bryce. Once he prepared them, their energetic state was set, not to be disturbed.
okay, setup complete. How did they actually kick off the séance? Build the atmosphere?
After the physical stuff, lights out, they'd start with collective focus. Singing the hymn, Lead Kindly Light.
Singing together.
Yeah, then an opening prayer and chanting the Lord's Prayer together. This sequence song, prayer, chant, was deliberate, meant to build a vortex of spirituality.
A vortex, like an energy field.
That's the concept. creating a receptive, high-vibration space for the spirit world to connect, a conscious raising of the collective energy.
Atmosphere cultivated. How did first contact usually happen? Who started the conversation?
Typically, Unison, the guide we mentioned, she'd often initiate, moving the trumpets around, maybe making them float, gently touching sitters on hands or faces.
Immediate physical proof of presence.
Exactly. A tangible confirmation right at the start. And often she and George Jones would sing together too, adding to the harmony, signaling the communication channel was open. Playful but purposeful.
Beyond the setup, what about the sitters themselves? Their responsibilities. The human factor seems huge.
Maybe the most important factor. Sitters were strongly urged. Keep out all thoughts and worries of the outside world. Shake off daily anxieties. Treat the room as a sanctuary.
Mental focus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
George Jones warned that worry affects the power directly, reduces the energy. So pure and pleasant thoughts were considered essential. To attract higher influences, get clear results. Our minds directly impacted it.
Mental purity. Any physical prep advised? Diet?
Yes, specific things. No one should touch alcohol for at least 3 hours before coming to a circle. Believed it messed with the ectoplasmic power.
Alcohol interferes. Makes sense energetically, maybe.
And they advised not to eat too liberally, especially of meat. Suggested something light instead. Shows they believed diet and substances affected your energetic state, your contribution to the delicate process. Lighter body, lighter vibration, maybe.
And harmony. That keeps coming up.
Foundational.
Yeah.
Most essential. Any distractions, bad thoughts, selfishness, even a critical attitude could break the harmony. Set up wrong vibrations, make communication difficult, distorted, maybe impossible.
So arguing or being skeptical could literally shut it down.
That was the belief. George Jones warned against too much talking, the gift of the gab, during séances. Said it breaks the vortex, that energy channel. Sitters needed to constantly balance emotion with reason, maintain the conditions. A collective job.
What about asking questions? Any guidance on that? Didn't want to disrupt the flow, presumably.
Right. Trivial or repetitive questions were seen as actually holding back spiritual progress for everyone involved.
So, no silly questions.
Pretty much. They advised organizing questions beforehand, put them through a designated leader in the circle, kept it focused, respectful, allowed for deeper communication, not just random chatter.
Okay, let's shift to something really practical and, well, compassionate that came out of this. Spiritual healing. What was the role of spirit doctors here?
This is a fascinating aspect. These spirit doctors are presented as highly advanced beings, using their knowledge for healing. The main figure was Dr. Forbes Winslow.
Who was he on Earth?
A distinguished figure. Oxford lecturer on mental diseases, Charing Cross Hospital, London. But the really interesting part,
What's that?
he apparently completely changed his views on spiritualism after he died. Acknowledged greater revelations that overturned his earthly skepticism.
A skeptic turned believer. From the other side, powerful. Were there others?
Yes, others assisted. Dr. Abdul Latif, Dr. Fullerton Ransom, Dr. Robinson are mentioned. Like a medical team operating from spirit.
So experienced doctors continuing their work. How did the healing actually work through the medium?
Primarily, Dr. Forbes Winslow would take full control of Lancelot Bryce, put him in a deep trance, sometimes for over 2 hours.
The medium completely submerged.
That's how it's described, his mentality completely submerged. And apparently, Bryce's facial features would visibly change, resembling Dr. Winslow like an elderly family doctor.
His face changed? Wow. And the purpose?
Explicitly, to render professional service to those who are in any way afflicted. Medical help from spirit.
What kinds of illnesses did they claim to treat?
A really wide range, things like nervous trouble, heart conditions, hardening of the muscles, bronchitis, varicose veins, sugar diabetes, curvature of the spine, eye problems, cast in the eyes, chronic rheumatism, nerve troubles, asthma, even diagnosing a small clot forming in one of the vessels in someone's brain.
That's incredibly specific diagnosis. How did they treat? Did they use the medium's body?
Yes, they diagnose, sometimes with startling accuracy apparently, prescribe treatments, and use the controlled medium's body to interact physically.
Like how?
Maybe massaging them with the electric bulb sounds strange, maybe an energy conduit, or just shaking hands, a point of contact. They stressed using elements like water and life vibrations.
Where did this healing energy come from, according to them?
Dr. Winslow explained it as divine. Electricity, in conjunction with vibrations we have brought here, is a great healing force and comes from God Almighty.
So God is the ultimate source.
Yes, and human bodies. Viewed as magnetic batteries that can be recharged from the vital forces that exist in the universe. tapping into a cosmic energy grid for healing. Very holistic.
What about the patient? Did they just lie back and receive? Or did they have a role?
Crucial role. Patient participation was vital. They were told to breathe slowly, consciously draw into the breath of life, keep their soul force in sympathy with the solar plexus and energy center.
Mind-body connection again.
Absolutely. And concentration on the thought, good health is everyone's birthright, was key. A powerful affirmation. Disease, they felt, often stemmed from unnatural conditions, not only physically but mentally.
If the body suffers, the spirit suffers.
If the body is starved, the spirit is cramped, they said. Pure thoughts help create a receptive state for healing.
Did Dr. Winslow ever wish he had better tools, even working from spirit?
He did. Very practical. He apparently expressed a desire for a blackboard.
A blackboard? Why?
To illustrate diagnoses with diagrams. Shows that professional, educational instinct was still strong. He also noted singing by the circle helped create the right vibrations for him to get full control of the medium. Conditions mattered even for healing.
And finally, that story about Dr. Winslow himself. Retracting his old skeptical views after he died, that must have resonated.
Hugely powerful, you'd imagine. He'd apparently believed spiritualism caused religious mania on Earth. A strong critic.
But he changed his mind.
Completely. From the spirit world, he explicitly retracted those views, acknowledged greater revelations, and he proved it.
How?
Sent a direct message to his son, also Forbes Winslow, still in England. Told his son about his changed perspective, admitted his earthly views were wrong, incomplete. That personal transformation communicated across the veil to family. Incredibly compelling evidence for the circle.
Hashtag outro.
Amanda, what an absolutely incredible journey through spirit voices that was. Just staggering stuff.
It really is, isn't it? So much to unpack. We went through the sheer dedication behind getting the book published, the unique mediumship of Lancelot Bryce.
His integrity, the progression of his gift, and then the mechanics, ectoplasm, direct voice. Fascinating, if mind-bending.
And meeting those guides, Unison, the feisty George Jones, the learned Dean Jacobs, mysterious Queer Claw, each bringing their own wisdom.
Yeah, and the big spiritual truths they shared. The continuity of who we are after death, heaven and hell being states of mind.
Right, continuous progress, God is love, not destruction, and that really radical view of Jesus as the ultimate medium.
Challenges so much, doesn't it? And then seeing the practical side too, the compassion in the spiritual healing work. Dr. Forbes Winslow's story.
It's just remarkable these records, collected so carefully back then, really offer this powerful testament to life continuing, to personality surviving.
And to this idea of active, compassionate help being available from the spirit world. A reminder that life is eternal, maybe, and that love connects us across dimensions.
So, for you listening, as you mull all this over, what does it mean? Dean Jacobs, quoted in the book, said, "Spiritualism is a religion founded on fact, a satisfaction the churches failed to give."
Yeah, provocative thought.
Yeah.
How might understanding these mechanisms, these truths, even just considering them, how might that change your perspective?
Yeah.
On life, death, the unseen forces may be at play.
Something to think about. Keep seeking that light. Keep exploring. And perhaps, like those sitters a century ago, keep proving the spirits for yourself.
Until next time, stay curious. Keep those hearts and minds open. You never know what lies just beyond the veil.